This is not just another story, it's a wake-up call. In today's episode of Heartfelt Tales, we uncover a shocking real-life experience that exposes the deep-seated prejudices still lingering in modern society. Imagine walking into a prestigious venue, dressed for success, ready to claim your rightful place at the table, only to be judged, dismissed, and treated as if you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to Jamal Carter, a brilliant lawyer, when he arrived at an elite business club in New York. But what happened next? That's where things take a turn no one saw coming. This is a story of dignity, quiet power, and a lesson that left an entire institution shaken. But here's the catch, you won't fully grasp its impact unless you watch till the very end. Fire like, comment, and subscribe before we dive in, because trust me, this one will make you think. Now, get ready, the truth starts unfolding right now. The Manhattan skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, a jagged silhouette of ambition and power stretching across the horizon. Jamal Carter stepped out of his sleek black Mercedes, the engine's low hum fading as he closed the door with a soft thud. His tailored black suit hugged his frame perfectly, the crisp white shirt beneath it catching the light just enough to hint at the meticulous care he put into his appearance. At 38, Jamal carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd fought for every inch of ground he stood on, and won. He adjusted his cufflinks, a pair of understated silver ovals engraved with his initials, and glanced up at the building before him. The Pinnacle Club was a fortress of exclusivity, its stone facade and gold-trimmed windows screaming old money and older prejudices. Tonight, it was hosting a networking event for some of New York's most influential investors, a rare chance for Jamal to pitch Carter and Associates to the kind of people who could catapult his firm into the stratosphere. He'd been invited by the club's president himself, a gesture that felt like both an olive branch and a test. As he approached the entrance, the cool September air brushed against his skin, carrying the faint scent of exhaust and expensive cologne. A doorman stood at the threshold, a broad-shouldered figure in a dark uniform, his face set in a mask of practiced indifference. Jamal offered a polite nod, but before he could take another step, the man's arm shot out, barring the way. "Sorry, sir," the doorman said, his voice flat but edged with something harder. "This is a private club. We don't accept guests without an invitation." Jamal paused, his dark eyes meeting the doorman's for a moment. He'd heard this tone before, too many times to count. It wasn't outright hostility, but it carried the weight of assumption, the kind that saw his skin before his suit, his presence before his purpose. He exhaled slowly, keeping his expression neutral. "I have an invitation," he said, reaching into his pocket for his phone. His fingers moved with deliberate calm as he unlocked the screen, opened his email, and scrolled to the message. The subject line read, "Pinnacle Club Investor Event, Guest of Honor." He turned the phone toward the doorman, letting the screen speak for itself. The man's eyes flicked over the text, his jaw tightening as if the words offended him. He lingered a beat too long, then stepped aside with a grunt, offering no apology or acknowledgement. Jamal slid the phone back into his pocket and walked past, the faint creak of the heavy glass door marking his entry into the club's hallowed halls. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and leather, the kind of opulence that felt suffocating rather than welcoming. A massive chandelier hung overhead, casting golden light across the marble floor, while portraits of stern-faced white men lined the walls, former presidents and benefactors, no doubt, staring down at him like silent gatekeepers. Jamal straightened his tie and made his way to the reception desk, where a woman in her 40s sat behind a sleek counter. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her smile was the practiced kind that never reached her eyes. "Good evening," Jamal said, resting one hand lightly on the counter. "I'm here for the investor event." The woman glanced up, her gaze lingering on him a moment too long. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "Are you a driver for someone?" she asked, her tone light but laced with an assumption that hit like a quiet slap. Jamal's lips twitched, the barest hint of a reaction, but he kept his voice steady. "No," he said. "I'm here as a lawyer and a business partner. Jamal Carter, Carter and Associates." She blinked, caught off guard, and her cheeks flushed faintly. "Oh," she said, recovering with a forced brightness. "Well, could you wait over there for a moment? I'll need to check something." Jamal nodded, stepping to the side as she'd indicated, a small waiting area, with a leather armchair and a low table stacked with glossy magazines. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood, hands clasped behind his back, and watched as the next guest approached the desk. The man was white, mid-50s, with a paunch straining against his navy blazer and a Rolex glinting on his wrist. He barely had to open his mouth before the receptionist's demeanor shifted entirely. "Mr. Hargrove," she chirped, her smile now genuine, her posture straightening as if pulled by invisible strings. "So wonderful to see you. Right this way, the VIP lounge is ready for you." Hargrove gave a curt nod and followed her lead, disappearing through a set of double doors without so much as a glance in Jamal's direction. The receptionist returned to her post, her eyes sliding past Jamal as if he'd become invisible. He stood there, the faint hum of conversation from deeper within the club buzzing in his ears, and let the moment settle over him like a familiar weight. It wasn't new, this quiet erasure. He'd felt it as a kid in the Bronx, watching teachers call on everyone but him, assuming he had nothing to say. He'd felt it in law school, when professors questioned his presence in a room full of trust fund legacies. And he'd felt it building Carter and Associates, brick by brick, while clients hesitated at the sight of a black man in the corner office. Each time, he'd turned it into fuel, proof that he belonged, even if they couldn't see it. He thought of his mother then, her voice sharp in his memory. Asterisk, "They'll try to make you small, Jamal. Don't let them." Asterisk, she'd worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for his books, her hands rough from years of labor, her pride in him fierce and unyielding. He'd made it this far because of her, because of the fire she'd lit in him. And now, standing in this gilded cage of privilege, he felt that fire flicker, not with anger, but with resolve. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Lisa, his assistant, asterisk, "Everything's set on my end. You good?" Asterisk, he glanced at it, then let his thumb hover over the screen. Not yet, he thought. But soon. He shifted his weight, the polished floor cool beneath his shoes, and watched as another guest breezed past the desk, a woman this time, white, her designer heels clicking with authority. The receptionist didn't ask her to wait. Jamal's jaw tightened, just for a second, before he smoothed it away. He'd been here 5 minutes, and already the pattern was clear. They saw him as an outsider, an anomaly to be questioned rather than welcomed. The double doors to the main event room swung open briefly, spilling out the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. He caught a glimpse of the crowd inside, mostly older, mostly white, their suits and smiles a uniform of entitlement. This was the world he was trying to break into, not for their approval, but for the resources they controlled. Carter and Associates had grown steadily over the past 5 years, taking on cases for minority-owned businesses and winning settlements against corporations that thought they could bully their way through. Tonight was supposed to be the next step, a chance to secure funding for a new division focused on systemic discrimination lawsuits. The invitation had felt like a crack in the door. Now, it felt like a trap. He glanced at his watch, 6:47 p.m. The event started at 7 o'clock, and he was still standing here, relegated to the sidelines. The receptionist was on the phone now, her voice low, her eyes darting toward him every few seconds. "Checking something," she'd said. "Checking what?" "His invitation. His right to exist in this space." He almost laughed, a dry, silent sound in his throat. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Jamal Carter wasn't a man who begged for a seat at the table. He'd built his own damn table, and if they couldn't see that, they'd learn the hard way. He pulled out his phone again, opened his messages, and typed a single line to Lisa, "Prepare Plan B," then he slipped it back into his pocket and waited, his posture relaxed but his mind already 3 steps ahead. The Pinnacle Club might have thought it could keep him out. It was about to find out how wrong it was. Jamal stood in the waiting area of the Pinnacle Club, the leather armchair beside him untouched, his hands still clasped behind his back. The receptionist's phone conversation dragged on, her hushed tones punctuated by quick glances in his direction. He didn't need to hear the words to know what was happening. She was double-checking his credentials, as if the email from the club's president wasn't proof enough. The clock on the wall ticked past 6:50 p.m., each second a quiet insult, but Jamal's face remained a mask of calm. He'd learned long ago that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when the stakes were this high. His phone vibrated again, a second text from Lisa, * plan be ready. Just say the word, * he didn't reply yet. Timing was everything, and he wasn't about to tip his hand too soon. Instead, he let his mind drift to the plan itself, a contingency he'd built into every high-stakes move since starting Carter and Associates. The firm's success hadn't come from luck, it came from preparation, from knowing the game was rigged and having a way out. Tonight, that way out was Lisa, a 29-year-old dynamo who'd been with him since the early days, her sharp mind and sharper instincts a perfect complement to his own. He shifted his gaze to the double doors leading to the event room. They swung open again, revealing a flash of the scene inside, men in tailored suits, women in sleek dresses, all orbiting a handful of power players whose names carried weight in boardrooms across the city. Jamal recognized a few faces, clients he'd beaten in court, investors he'd pitched to before. They were the reason he was here, the gatekeepers to the next phase of his vision. But standing in this gilded purgatory, he felt the familiar tug of doubt, not in himself, but in them. Could they see past their own biases long enough to hear him out? The receptionist hung up the phone and looked at him, her expression a mix of reluctance and forced politeness. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice tight. "There seems to be a slight delay. If you could just wait a few more minutes." "That won't be necessary," Jamal interrupted, his tone smooth but firm. "I'd like to speak to the event manager. Now." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the phone, then nodded. "Of course. I'll call him down." Jamal gave a small nod and stepped back, his eyes scanning the lobby. The doorman lingered near the entrance, arms crossed, watching him with the same guarded look he'd worn outside. The air felt heavier now, thick with unspoken tension, but Jamal didn't flinch. He'd faced worse than this, courtrooms where judges smirked at his arguments, boardrooms where CEOs dismissed him before he'd finished a sentence. This was just another battlefield, and he knew how to fight without raising his voice. Before the manager could appear, the front doors swung open again, admitting a new figure. Richard Hensley strode in, his silver hair catching the chandelier's light, his navy suit crisp despite the late hour. At 62, Richard was a fixture in New York's investment scene, a man who'd made millions betting on underdogs and wasn't afraid to buck tradition. He'd crossed paths with Jamal 2 years ago, when Carter and Associates won a settlement against a tech giant Richard had a stake in. Instead of holding a grudge, Richard had sought him out afterward, impressed by Jamal's tenacity. They weren't friends, exactly, but there was mutual respect, a rare currency in this world. Richard's eyes landed on Jamal, and his face broke into a broad grin. "Jamal," he called, crossing the lobby in a few quick strides. "Good to see you, man. I was hoping you'd be here tonight." He extended a hand, his grip firm and genuine. Jamal shook it, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good to see you too, Richard. I wouldn't miss it." The receptionist froze mid-motion, her hand still on the phone, her face draining of color. Richard didn't seem to notice, his attention fixed on Jamal. "We've got a hell of a lineup tonight," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Some of these guys have been asking about you, your firm's making waves. You ready to shake things up?" Jamal's smile widened, but there was a glint in his eyes that Richard didn't catch. "I've been ready," he said. "But I'm afraid this event won't be happening here anymore." Richard blinked, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Jamal didn't answer right away. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages, and sent a single word to Lisa, "Go," then he slipped it back into his pocket and met Richard's gaze. "Let's just say I've had a change of plans. You'll see soon enough." Before Richard could press further, the double doors opened again, and a murmur rippled through the lobby as a few guests trickled out, checking their phones. Jamal's own device buzzed, "Lisa again, * hotel booked. Guests notified. ETA 30 minutes, * he allowed himself a small, private nod. The wheels were turning now, and there was no going back. Half a mile away, Lisa sat in her cramped office at Carter & Associates, her laptop glowing in the dim light. She was a whirlwind of motion, fingers flying across the keyboard, phone pressed to her ear, her dark curls bouncing as she leaned forward. "Yes, the penthouse suite," she said into the receiver, her voice clipped but polite. "We'll need it ready by 7:30, full catering, open bar. Can you make that happen?" The hotel manager on the other end stammered something about short notice, but Lisa cut him off. "I know it's tight, but we're bringing 50-plus guests, high-profile names. You'll want this business. Trust me." She didn't wait for a reply, hanging up and dialing the next number on her list. She'd been with Jamal since the firm was just a desk and a dream, back when they were taking on small cases no one else would touch. She'd seen him build it into something real, something that mattered, and she'd put her own career on the line to make it happen. Tonight wasn't just about him, it was about them, about every time they'd been underestimated. The Pinnacle Club snub wasn't a surprise, but it still burned, and she'd be damned if she let it stand. Her phone pinged with Jamal's text, *go*, and she grinned, a fierce little spark lighting her eyes. She fired off a mass email to the event's guest list, her words sharp and professional, * due to unforeseen circumstances, tonight's investor event has been relocated to the Grand Meridian Hotel, penthouse suite. Doors open at 7:30 p.m. We look forward to seeing you there, * then she called the caterer, the AV team, and a car service, her voice a steady drumbeat of authority. Within 20 minutes, the pieces were in place. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling hard, and glanced at the framed photo on her desk, her and Jamal at the firm's first big win, both of them grinning like kids. "You owe me one, boss," she muttered, then grabbed her jacket and headed out to meet the storm she'd just unleashed. Back at the Pinnacle Club, the lobby was starting to hum with confusion. Richard stood beside Jamal, scrolling through his phone as the email from Lisa popped up. "The Grand Meridian," he said, looking up. "What the hell's going on, Jamal?" Jamal shrugged, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "I decided this wasn't the right venue for what I have in mind. The Meridian's got better space, better service. You'll like it." Richard studied him for a moment, then chuckled. "You're a sly one, Carter. All right, I'm in. Let's see what you've got up your sleeve." The double doors burst open again, and this time, a steady stream of guests emerged, some curious, some annoyed, all clutching their phones. Jamal stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to carry. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I apologize for the inconvenience. The event's moving to the Grand Meridian Hotel, just a few blocks away. Cars are outside if you need them. We'll get started at 7:30. A murmur ran through the crowd, but no one argued. Richard clapped him on the shoulder, already heading for the door. "You're full of surprises," he said. "I like that." Jamal watched as the lobby emptied out, the exodus swift and decisive. Over 50 people, investors, CEOs, influencers, filed past the receptionist, who stood frozen behind her counter, her mouth slightly agape. The doorman shifted uncomfortably, his earlier smugness gone. Jamal didn't spare them a glance. He adjusted his cufflinks one last time and walked out into the night, the cool air hitting his face like a victory. By 7:25, the Grand Meridian's penthouse suite was alive with light and sound. Lisa had worked a miracle. The room was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a jaw-dropping view of the city. Tables groaned under trays of food, bartenders poured drinks with practiced ease, and a low hum of conversation filled the air as guests mingled. Jamal stood near the center, a glass of water in hand, his presence commanding without effort. Richard approached, a whiskey in his grip. "You pulled this off in under an hour," he said, shaking his head. "I'm impressed." Jamal smiled, a real one this time. "I had help," he said, nodding toward Lisa, who was across the room, directing a waiter with the same efficiency she'd brought to the pivot. "And I don't waste time when I know what I want." Richard raised his glass. "To not wasting time, then. Let's talk business." As the night unfolded, Jamal moved through the crowd, pitching his vision with the same quiet fire he'd carried all evening. The Pinnacle Club had tried to shut him out, but he'd turned their game upside down. And he was just getting started. The Grand Meridian's penthouse suite buzzed with energy as the clock ticked past 9 p.m. The room, bathed in the soft glow of recessed lighting and the city's endless sparkle beyond the windows, had transformed into a hub of power and possibility. Investors leaned in close to hear Jamal's pitch, their skepticism melting into nods of interest as he outlined his plans for Carter and Associates' new division, a legal juggernaut aimed at dismantling systemic discrimination, one case at a time. His voice was steady, his words precise, each sentence a brick in the foundation he was building before their eyes. Across the room, Lisa kept everything running like clockwork, her sharp eyes catching every detail, a spilled drink here, a guest needing a nudge there. She'd swapped her office jeans for a sleek black dress, her curls pinned up, but her energy was the same, relentless, focused, a force of nature in her own right. Jamal caught her eye once, offering a small nod of gratitude, and she flashed a grin back, partners in this victory, as they'd been in so many before. Richard Hensley lingered nearby, nursing his second whiskey, his earlier amusement replaced by something closer to awe. "You've got balls, Carter," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Pulling this off under their noses. That's a statement." Jamal took a sip of his water, the coolness grounding him. "It's not about statements," he said. "It's about results. They didn't want me there, so I made a place where I belong." Richard chuckled, raising his glass. "Fair enough. I'm in, $500,000 to start. Let's see where this takes us." Jamal shook his hand, sealing the deal with a quiet intensity. $500,000 was just the beginning. He'd walk away tonight with commitments from at least 3 other investors, enough to fund the new division for a year. The Pinnacle Club had tried to lock him out, but he'd turned their snub into a launch pad. As the night wound down, guests trickled out, their voices carrying promises of follow-ups and meetings. Jamal stood by the window, the city sprawling beneath him, and let the weight of it sink in. He'd won, not with noise, but with action. Meanwhile, back at the Pinnacle Club, the lobby was a ghost town. The marble floor gleamed under the chandelier's light, but the silence was deafening. The receptionist sat behind her counter, her hands idle, her face pale as she stared at the empty space where dozens of guests had been an hour ago. The doorman paced near the entrance, his earlier swagger replaced by a nervous fidgeting. Upstairs, in a wood-paneled office, the event manager, Thomas Grayson, a wiry man with thinning hair and a perpetual scowl, slumped in his chair, phone pressed to his ear. "Please, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice cracking with desperation. "We didn't mean any offense. It was a misunderstanding, a mix-up with the staff. Come back, and we'll comp the whole event, VIP treatment, whatever you want." Jamal's voicemail clicked on, and Thomas left the message, his third in 20 minutes. He dropped the phone onto his desk, rubbing his temples. The club's president had already called, furious, demanding answers for why half the city's elite had walked out on what was supposed to be their flagship night. Thomas had no good ones. He'd seen Jamal waiting in the lobby, assumed the delay was routine, and let the staff handle it. Now, the consequences were piling up like a house of cards in a storm. By morning, the fallout was undeniable. Word of the exodus spread through New York's black business community like wildfire, fueled by texts, calls, and a few well-placed posts on X. A prominent restaurateur, a longtime member, cancelled his membership by 8 a.m., citing a culture of disrespect. 2 tech entrepreneurs followed suit, their emails to the club curt and final. By noon, a coalition of minority-owned businesses announced they'd boycott future events at the Pinnacle, their collective clout enough to make the club's board sweat. Membership dues were its lifeblood, and losing even a fraction of them stung. Thomas called Jamal again, this time reaching him live. "Mr. Carter, please," he said, his tone pleading. "We'll do anything to make this right. Name your price." Jamal stood in his office at Carter and Associates, the phone on speaker as he sorted through a stack of case files. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. He paused, setting a folder down, and leaned forward slightly. "Tomas," he said, his voice even, "respect isn't something you can buy back after it's gone. You had your chance. We're done here." He hung up before Thomas could respond, the click of the call ending like a gavel striking. Jamal turned back to his work, the faint hum of the city outside a reminder of the bigger fight ahead. The Pinnacle Club wasn't the enemy, it was a symptom, a relic of a system that thrived on exclusion. He'd hit it where it hurt, but the real victory was last night, in that penthouse, where he'd turned their game on its head. The story didn't stay quiet for long. By midweek, it was the talk of legal circles and black professional networks. A young journalist at a local paper pitched a profile on Jamal, tentatively titled, "The Man Who Walked Away," and won. He declined the interview, not out of modesty, but because he didn't need the spotlight. The work spoke for itself. 2 days later, Jamal sat in his office, the late afternoon light painting the walls in shades of gold. Across from him was Marcus, a 20-year-old intern from Harlem, his tie slightly crooked, his notebook open on his lap. Marcus had been with the firm for 3 months, shadowing Jamal on cases and soaking up every word like a sponge. He was bright, hungry, the kind of kid who reminded Jamal of himself at that age, before the world had taught him its harder lessons. "So," Marcus said, tapping his pen against the page, "I heard about the Pinnacle thing. Everyone's talking about it. How'd you stay so cool? I'd have lost it if they treated me like that." Jamal leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the arms, and studied Marcus for a moment. The kid's eyes were wide, earnest, searching for something, maybe a secret, maybe a map. Jamal smiled faintly, the memory of that night still fresh. "It's not about staying cool," he said. "It's about knowing what you're worth." They wanted me to beg for a seat at their table, shout, argue, prove I belonged. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Marcus frowned, scribbling a note. "But they dissed you, right? Right to your face. Didn't that piss you off?" "Sure it did," Jamal admitted, his voice low but steady. "I'm human. But anger's a tool, Marcus. You don't let it run you, you use it. I took that energy and built something better. They thought they could push me out, so I showed them what happens when I walk away." Marcus nodded slowly, processing. "Like that case last year, the one with the construction company. You told me they tried to lowball your client, and you flipped it into a 6-figure settlement." "Exactly," Jamal said, pointing a finger at him. "They underestimate you because they don't see you. That's their mistake. We don't need to scream or beg for acceptance. We create value, undeniable value, and if they can't respect that, we take it somewhere else." Marcus grinned, jotting that down. "That's cold, Mr. Carter. Real cold." Jamal chuckled, the sound warm and rare. "Call it strategic. You'll learn it too, kid. Keep your head up, and don't let them make you small." The conversation stretched on, Marcus peppering him with questions, about law school, about the firm, about the fights he'd won and lost. Jamal answered patiently, seeing in Marcus the same fire his mother had seen in him. It was a quiet mentorship, unscripted but deliberate, a passing of the torch he hadn't planned but couldn't avoid. By the time Marcus left, the sky outside had darkened, the city lights blinking on like stars. Jamal stood alone in his office, the silence settling around him like a cloak. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, and looked out at Manhattan's glowing sprawl. The towers rose sharp and unyielding, a testament to ambition, but beneath them ran the currents of a harder truth, a city, a world, still wrestling with its shadows. He'd grown up in its margins, a black kid from the Bronx with a borrowed library card and a mother who wouldn't let him quit. Now, he stood here, at the edge of something bigger, still fighting. The Pinnacle Club was a blip, a skirmish in a war that stretched back generations. He'd struck a blow, sure, but the real work lay ahead, cases piling up on his desk, clients counting on him, a new division to build. The investors' money was a start, but it was his vision that would carry it forward. He thought of his mother again, her voice a whisper in the quiet, they'll try to make you small, Jamal. Don't let them. He hadn't. He wouldn't. He turned from the window, the city's pulse a steady beat against his back, and picked up a file from his desk, a pro bono case, a small business owner facing eviction by a predatory landlord. It wasn't glamorous, but it was why he'd started this firm, to fight for the ones who couldn't fight alone. The Pinnacle Club could keep its chandeliers and its gatekeepers. Jamal Carter had his own table, and it was getting bigger every day. As he flipped open the file, the faint hum of the city faded into focus, a battlefield, a proving ground, a home. He'd keep pushing, one quiet step at a time, because that's how you changed the world, not with noise, but with strength that couldn't be ignored. And just like that, Jamal Carter walked away, not in anger, not in defeat, but with a silent move so powerful that it sent ripples through the entire business world. The club lost more than just one guest that night. They lost a reputation, a future, and a lesson they had to learn the hard way. But here's the real question, how often does this happen without anyone speaking up? How many others have faced the same judgment but had no way to fight back? This isn't just Jamal's story, it's a reflection of a much larger issue. So now, it's your turn. What would you have done in his place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Fire if this story made you think, hit that like button, share it, and subscribe, because more stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss them. And as for Jamal, well, let's just say, this wasn't the last move he made. But to know what happened next, you'll have to stay tuned.